I mean, we all knew how this was going to end. Season 7, Episode 12, Victory and Death. Can I just say, that funeral chant over the intro is just fantastic. The way it's presented, the way it's shown. Do you notice also, we're getting one single breath in this episode before we immediately jump into action. Admittedly, and this is not a complaint at all, but a lot of this episode is action to the point where I almost feel silly about mentioning it because there's not a lot to talk about during action scenes. There's some good action on display, there's some thought in it, but a lot of this episode is the escape, trying to get the hell off the ship. So we get one breath, and then the door opens and they're off. She's trying to deflect, he's trying to stun, and that's all they've got. And the whole time Rex is putting on this interesting brave face. And I find that fascinating the way he does it, because the whole time he gives no real sign that he's bothered by all this. Unless you count, of course, the tear from earlier, back in the previous episode. Maul walks into a giant-ass engine room. Of course it's a giant-ass engine room. It's always got to be big in Star Wars. You ever notice that? He walks in, and he's actually being very creative about this. You know, aiming the soldiers to shoot at each other, deflecting him and killing him with his own helmet, stuff like that. He's being very creative about this because he could just brute force it, and indeed he actually does brute force it a little bit. I could see some people complaining about how strong Maul is here, but I believe it completely because Maul draws most heavily upon the dark side, probably exclusively on the dark side. And Maul is terrified, really, really pissed, and desperate. You cannot tell me that at this point in time that he is not using all of that horror that is thundering through his veins to its greatest extent. Yeah. So he literally rips out the hyperdrive, which forces the ship out of hyperspace, which, without doing it properly, is exactly as damaging as that should be. I know that the AU changed the rules in hyperspace, and I have been very vocal about how much I hate the new rule set, or rather, lack of rule set for how hyperspace works. But even using just basic general knowledge and concepts, it makes sense that if you force a ship abruptly out of FTL, that's probably going to suck. There's even this wonderful scene, and Star Wars has always been good about its visuals, right? Big, powerful, impacting visuals. I've spoken many, many times about how one of my favorite sequences in Rogue One is actually the scenes on the desert planet Jakku. I'm actually not sure the name of the planet. Not Tatooine. Because of how well directed they were, because of how impressive and powerful the visuals were, right? Jeddah, thank you. Tatooine 3, what do you want from me? Because they're like, open the hangar doors, and the hangar doors open, and you know how a Venator is designed. So the hangar doors are up at the top of the ship, and they can't even see the stars for the moon, which is completely consuming the view. Yeah. So, as usual, the soldiers are willing to use absolutely overwhelming force and are absolutely willing to die and take them with them, along with the thing. It says so much about how overriding this chip is. And again, just reiterates what I've already said in the previous episode. Palpatine is willing to throw away anything and everything to make this happen. You know what I like most about this four-parter? Palpatine's not really in it. He has one scene briefly in the previous episode where he says, execute Order 66. That's it. And yet, we can't escape him. I've actually talked about this before. This is negative space character enforcement. The idea of drawing something without actually drawing it, right? Drawing everything around it, drawing the things that are impacted by it. My usual go-to example for that is actually the Dark Lord Sauron over in Lord of the Rings. But this is a really good example of that type of thing. You cannot help but feel Palpatine's fingerprints everywhere. It is so him. and ignoring the obvious fact that let's put this all into motion very deliberately, even the very style of how they're approaching things is all about him, his tactics, his approval. There's this really great scene, and it's a necessary scene. This whole time, we're actually several minutes in, because again, action, where Rex is trying to tell Ahsoka that they need to be willing to go and kill their own troops. Actually, yeah, Rex, I would agree with that. Very much like the Borg, actually. I know you're not super familiar with that, but for those of you, I'll go ahead and talk about this. Here's an interesting tidbit. Most people consider Best of Both Worlds Part 1 to be the best Borg episode ever constructed over on Star Trek. What's fascinating, what most people don't realize, is how little screen time the Borg have in that episode. It's fascinating structure, because what happens is, here's the length of the episode, right? And they do character stuff, and build-up stuff, and character stuff, and build-up stuff, and then the Borg show up for like 40 seconds. Not even a minute. And then they're gone. And then you spend several convening minutes dealing with that, because the Borg just metaphorically and or thematically upended the table, right? Just table flipped. And so now it's dealing and coping with all of the crap that they just did. Oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god. And then the Borg show up again for like 30 seconds. And then you spend several more... You get it, right? Very carefully and precisely using the overwhelming force. And that's Palpatine. This is also the first time that I really processed that that's Jesse. That's freaking Jesse. You know, from Umbara, or Umbara, however you say it, Krell. He's the one who's in charge of the effort to try and brutally kill Rex and Ahsoka. It makes sense. From a creative perspective, they wanted to use a clone that we knew. One who had enough screen time, enough characterization to be developed as his own person. He also refers to Rex consistently by his number. Just catch that? For those of you who don't remember, Jesse hated that back in his arc. Rex tries so desperately to reach out to Jesse, and of course it doesn't work at all. None of it works. It can't. And now we see the hard mode of this whole sequence, this final battle. They have to fight these people who are desperately and very accurately trying to kill them, and these are some really skilled troopers, while desperately trying to not kill them. Jesse does hesitate, I noticed that. Bought them a few seconds, but that's all it did. Maul doesn't talk a lot in this episode, appropriately. But there's this funny bit where he's obviously very angry and still in pain and still afraid. And Ahsoka's like, hold up, and his response is, you wanted this chaos. Sure. Yeah, send it to me on Discord, as it is. And there's this really great moment where Maul is trying to escape, and Ahsoka goes right for his neck. No half measures, no nothing else. Just goes straight for a killing blow. And if not for, honestly, pretty close luck there, if not for just a few seconds, or hell, not even seconds, like a few milliseconds, there's a pretty good chance she would have just beheaded Maul right then and there. And he knows it. He catches that. You'll notice that he wastes zero time in immediately turning around and getting into the ship and trying to get the hell out of Dodge. And as soon as he does eventually get his ship away, his shuttle away, he's out. Gone. He doesn't waste 1 second to getting into hyperspace and just getting the hell out of Dodge. Don't blame him. Naturally, though, he does get away because Rebels, but also because Ahsoka decided to go and save Rex, which I don't really blame her for. And there's this wonderful visual, again, of all of the troopers surrounded all in neat lines, pounding on them as hard as they can, as the ship is getting more and more unsalvageable. Just constantly trying to kill these people, even as they're all about to die. And they've got to know that. On some level, they've got to process that. And then they kill the droids. I cannot be the only person who was just like, no! Like, I actually said that out loud when that portion hit. Because I was sort of assuming the droids would get on whatever escape they found. But nope. That was the only death that surprised me in this entire bit right here. Let me tell you a little tip. Whether it's a show, a movie, or a game, if you're going to really want to make your final boss pop, think about where it's set. Whether you're under a thunderstorm, or as the ocean is crashing down around you, or you're on the ruined and wrecked, broken remains of a dead world, or if you're in the throne room of a despot on top of a planet killer, or whatever, right? You think about the setting. The set dressing matters when it comes to a final battle. And as you're on a dying ship actively plummeting down into a moon, that is one hell of a set piece. And of course they find the one ship that's active. A Y-Wing. I'm going to be honest, that works for me more than I thought it would. That's a hell of a bit of symbolism right there. A timer without a clock, that's another good one. Just completely overwhelming her. This whole sequence, I feel so stupid emphasizing it. They are absolutely pouring into her as hard and as brutally as they can. I actually start getting some hits on her because she's just getting run down. And then Rex is damned loyal here. I mean, duh, of course he is. But really, I feel the need to point out and process how insane what he does is. He takes a snub fighter into an actively escalating debris trail of a disintegrating capital ship in atmosphere, which means reduced maneuverability and capacity. And that's actually kind of crazy. It's also one of the worst parts of the episode. Don't mistake me, this is a damn good episode, but holy crap, I get it, they're going to live. Stop spending too much time on this, please. Like, there's this bit where she's reaching, and it's the only moment of the whole episode that actually lost me, and I'm like, yeah, come on, guys. Come on. Okay, she got it. Okay, cool. Moving on. So then the ship dies, and the troopers die, and the bridge people die, and everybody dies. Even their escape doesn't really have triumphant music. I mean, why would it? God, I love the music direction here. There's graves, there's scarred and scuffed and bloodied helmets, while Ahsoka, who is clad in robes, just watches. And at first, I was wondering why she deliberately left her lightsaber behind. But actually, other than the obvious symbolism on display, it makes a lot of pragmatic sense. She died in the crash, after all. So... And then they do an interesting fade. Let me tell you a little interesting tidbit. This is not universally true, but it's usually considered standard operating procedure that if you do a crossfade, that's specifically trying to showcase the passage of time, right? And so, I mention this because Star Wars almost always does wipe fades, wipe transitions, going all the way back to A New Hope. It was actually considered unusual for that even back then. And the shows tend to follow that. Most Star Wars media follows the wipe fade, you know, this kind of a thing, or this kind of a thing, or whatever. Even this episode does that several times. But they actually do a crossfade as we skip to the future. The snow has overtaken the ship. Most of the graves aren't even visible anymore. We see snowtroopers, we see stormtroopers, we see a Lambda shuttle come down, and a certain iconic breathing. And Vader goes, picks up the lightsaber, blue lightsaber, and then deignites it. And Vader recedes from the trooper's vision, and pretty much the final, no really last tidbit of the Old Republic. And the Clone Wars are over. Once again, great visuals. And now we're into the dark times. I'm not going to meme on it. The one thing I was thinking about, I'm going to try to find the exact number. It's over here. It's right about here. There it is. That is 12 minutes. I'm probably missing something, But for roughly 12 minutes, there is no dialogue in this episode. Did you catch that? It's almost half the episode. Like, they talk, and they talk, and they debate, and they go out, and they argue their way through it, and they've got to let them go, and oh my god, they're coming. And then, pretty much from the moment they fall down into the pit, there's no, or it's actually specific to the moment where Rex is trying to find a functional escape vector. And then, it's just action, visuals, presentation, ship starts descending, they get on the Y-Wing, Rex tries to succeeds at saving him. The funeral scene, I really wish I could play the actual music that plays here for you, because it is essentially perfect. In total contrast to my complaining several times during this very series, this is very much showing and not telling. And it's essentially perfect. And yeah, someone actually mentioned this quote earlier. It's a quote from Battlefront, of all things, but it's a great quote, paraphrased. You know what I remember most about the Rise of the Empire? How quiet it was. This is an easy purple. I don't think anybody's even going to argue with me on this one. Like, this is just, wow. I don't even know what to add to this. That's a hell of a spread and a hell of an impact and a hell of an ending. It leads so beautifully into the dark times. So, let's talk about the arc as a whole. So the arc we gave a red, a purple, and a purple. Yeah, I think you can guess what my thoughts are on the arc. This is the episode 3 we never got. It perfectly adds to episode 3 and is added to by episode 3. This is definitely a purple arc. Season 7 as a whole, it's a little bit trickier. One of the things I like to do is to quantify and to categorize things. I like to get actual numbers involved. As you can see right there, we can actually see, we have now reviewed, such as it is, all of Season 7. So we can actually say that the rough ratio of Season 7 is 65.28%. And that's pretty good. But it's nowhere near as good as it probably should have been. Looking at that arc, looking at those numbers, for those of you looking at the spreadsheet with me, this is very visually indicative. It's one of the reasons I actually colored the episodes, just so you can see that contrast. You know, first arc, good to great. Second arc actually dipped down into blue, for God's sakes. And the second arc was overall pretty terrible and dragged everything down. And then the final arc hit like a frickin' hammer. If we look at our ratios here, for those of you not looking at the spreadsheet, or for those of you watching this on YouTube months from now, we had 8.3% of the episodes were blue, 25% were green, 25% were orange, 16.3% red, and a shocking 25% purple. That's impressive. Also, if you're paying attention, that means 50% of the episodes are good or better, as in above average. That's pretty impressive, but then we count in the reds, which actually pushes that number up to 66.7, aka 2/3. 2/3 above average episodes. That's pretty damn good. How's this compared to other favorites? I don't have the numbers on hand, but this is pretty good, solid. I will admit that. And I would be lying if I said otherwise, that the filler arc does drag the overall thing down, and I'll never watch it again. I'll never watch episodes 5 through 8 ever again. There's no reason to. I might rewatch the good episodes at some point, and I will definitely try to spend some time looking into that fan edit, or one of the fan edits, because apparently there's several. Or maybe I'll make my own. I don't know. We'll figure it out. I am more impressed than I thought it would be, for whatever that's worth. Now, it's going to take us longer to get through the next few things, because even though Andor is also 12 episodes, I'm told they are roughly 44s. Definitely longer than this stuff. So that's going to be a thing we'll start. I'm not sure I want to start tomorrow. Let me go ahead and chop off the local recording first.